all, all of our other speakers are going to get a normal introduction, but I've always wanted to do this. So let me just say, ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Steve Ballmer. All right, Steve, so tell us the truth. How many times did you practice that dunk?
5. Well, 5 sessions.
So that might look like an NBA owner having fun, living out his childhood dreams, but you know, that was part of a broader fan engagement strategy. I mean, you are being strategic in what you do here. What have you learned so far in your 2 years as an owner about using social media, using these new tools to really engage with the Clippers fans and with the NBA in general?
Well, there are a lot of different elements of the question you asked, so
yes.
I'm not sure where to start. First thing I'll tell you is teams don't own social media. Players do. Just take a look at the follower numbers. You know, teams work hard. We work hard. Everybody works hard. Chris Paul, he's got 3 million or more followers. You know, you take a look. People are fans of teams, but people are really fans, at least in basketball, of top-notch players. And, you know, that's what should be, but also interesting, if you think about it, then the player's brand transfers. If they want to make a move in our sport and free agency, whatever they want to do, and the thing I think is important for teams to try to do is to build their own unique brands and to recognize that playing off their players' brands is very important.
So how do you deal with that when you're dealing with things like player negotiations? Do you ever want to have some control over their social media, or do you just, is that a ridiculous question?
Well, yeah, it's a ridiculous question. In 2 ways, it's a ridiculous question. Number one, nobody wants to control their players, at least not in that sense. And number 2, under the union contract, you couldn't if you wanted to. Yeah. So yeah, ridiculous question.
So you appeared at another tech conference, and they wanted to keep asking you about Microsoft, which we're not going to do today. And you said to them, "Why aren't you talking about sports and tech?" And I think the exact quote was, "Because it's crazy. It's crazy." So what's crazy about it? What gets you most excited when you look at these two worlds of yours, sports and technology?
Well, you can take a look at almost anybody involved in a sports event, from the ticket taker to the people who are producing what goes up on the Jumbotron, to the coaches, to the front office guys, to the fan in the stadium, to the fan at home. And every one of them, there's a set of things that tech will enable to be different. And depending on what hat is on that day, I'll be fired up about it. You know, it's nice to have paperless tickets. I was listening to that. That's not my big problem. I'd love the tickets to be paperless. That's great. What I'd really like is to have more Clipper fans and less of our opponents' fans in our arena. So how do we control ticket sales so that the building pumps and thumps with our guys, you know, instead of all these California transplants from hither and yon who want to come and, yay, you know, Celtics, go. I don't want that in our arena, really. And the question is, what does technology enable? Not just for taking the existing kind of processes and what you're doing, but how does it let you do things differently? What really is going to be different? Are you going to look at media, video differently if you're the video coordinator and the coach? Yeah. Guys are pulling that video now real time in the game. During the game, coach, let me show you this. Coach, let me show you that, which is great. Step up. I mean, literally in real time. But how do you push that every step to the next level, to the next level? You know, if you're selling tickets, yep, there's a lot of ways to be better. You're building brand, yep, there's a lot of ways to be better. The key thing I think you got to say is, from a fan, how do you change the way the fan appreciates the game? In the arena, outside the arena during the game, outside the arena between games. I mean, the guys were talking about some of it, but I think there's a lot of stuff to be fired up about in the way the fan experiences the game, in addition to all of the functions of people involved with the team.
What's working so far for the Clippers? Is there one or two things that you've done that you look at in technology and fan engagement that you just say, yeah, more of that, more of that?
We've tried some things. I don't think any of them has fundamentally changed a darn thing. You know, we did this thing where fans in the arena basically could pick their favorite play. You know, I want to see Jamal Crawford on a blitz, and we'd flash him up on the Jumbotron during the game. But this guy, I thought it was just hot as hell. Fans, it's okay. It's okay. We didn't do it the second season because it wasn't a game changer, a little confusing. Not a bad thing, but not well enough packaged and presented. And the analytics technology, you know, if you said you wanted to see Jamal Crawford on a blitz, boom, we could bring that up, put your picture on the Jumbotron from your, you know, Twitter or Facebook or whatever account. But, you know, it's about doing more than that. What's the next step? We still haven't beaten the Kiss Cam as the sort of fan favorite for timeouts. You know, Kiss Cam trumps. Just the tech's not as good as the Kiss Cam yet.
Well, speaking of fundamental changes, you've said that you're serious about a possible streaming service for the Clippers, a dedicated streaming service, which would be kind of unprecedented in sports. What would that look like?
Well, there's two ways it could look. Number one, you could take the existing experience and stream it. And in a contract situation, if we're not going to get paid as much as we want to get paid by the RSNs, then we can do that, and that's a great thing. But the real objective isn't just to take the existing experience and stream it. The real, I think, opportunity is to, if you will, augment reality as people are watching the game. Can you put yourself in the position of Blake Griffin? What does it look like? What does the game in question look like in real time from his perspective? Can you sit on the shoulders of Chris Paul or DeAndre Jordan or anyone, or even somebody who plays for the other team? You know, can we allow you to do that? Can we allow you to explain to your friend in the room, oh, that was this play? Or maybe you don't know what play it is, and you can bring it up just in a separate window. Oh, I see. This is a pick and pop of a certain kind that was defended in a certain way. There was a 38% chance of that shot being made. As we get better and better, you can just literally, you'll follow the percent probabilities of the guy if you want to. If you don't want to, turn it off. You'll follow the percent probabilities that somebody can make a shot, will make a pass, what the decision-making looks like. That is possible over the next several years. We're partnered up with a company that basically is a machine learning company that has Second Spectrum. They have machine learning technology that essentially gives them a piece of software that understands basketball in great depth. And the question is, if you take that sort of core platform, what are the full set of solutions that you might build out, and can that, in a way that, you know, fans enjoy, can you change the game? And there's a lot of things you can talk, ooh, that'll be cool, ooh, that'll be cool. You know, how do you let fans customize the experience? Their perspective, their camera angles. How do you let them sit center court if they want to sit center court as opposed to the standard angle with which the game is watched? What will really resonate, and how do we get there? How do we get there at a price, frankly, that's cost effective? Will some fans pay more for a premium experience? None of that. There's no capitalism working right now in sports. Teams sign these rights agreements that go for a long period of time, and nobody actually has any incentive to work hard. The team has no incentive because the money's going to be the same in any event. The broadcaster has a long-term contract with the cable company. They have no incentive to work harder. And the cable company, they're just basically taking a bundle of stuff and sticking it out there for the fan. So how does capitalism, the way it does in many other things, help sort of focus people on new opportunities, change, maybe having to sell subscriptions as part of a streaming service? That, just the very fact of that capitalism will make us and maybe other teams and maybe in other sports work harder over time.
So that's the technology side and a little bit of the business side. Where are you right now in that process of setting that up, negotiating the rights? Give us a status update.
Well, the one thing we don't need to do is negotiate the rights.
Right. Of course.
We have our rights.
Yeah.
You know, when I sit on the tech side, oh, when do the contracts come up? I remember sitting there at Microsoft, well, we want to be able to do something with Xbox, with football, but the football rights thing is a mess. Our contract ended on June 30th with our RSN. Now, we may renew it in a certain form for a certain period of time. We have no animosity towards our RSN, but we're not going to let our partnership get in the way of us retaining the rights we need to create a different kind of experience.
At Microsoft, you're a numbers guy, and you were legendary for finding a mistake on page 32 of some product manager's PowerPoint. KPIs, key performance indicators, were the name of the game. What are your KPIs in your new role as an MBA owner? What are the numbers that you pay most attention to?
What is the most important KPI? Wins. Okay, that's so easy. Thank you all very much. Let's go home. It's been a pleasure talking today.
What about after that?
Look, there are plenty of things to go look at. We don't own our arena, so a lot of things about fan experience, food and beverage, they're not on our list. Because frankly, we get what we get from AEG, who owns Staples Center. So from the fan experience standpoint, what can we look at? We can look at ratings. Ratings is a big deal. Our ratings and the Lakers' ratings have gotten very close together, and they're, frankly, neither one of them is very big. The sport is very popular. If you look at what happened this year with the NBA playoffs, the demographic is young. I heard the last panel, and there were a bunch of soccer, but basketball is the other global sport. And in the two biggest countries in the world, actually, basketball is the biggest sport.
Yeah.
That would be in China. Well, not the two biggest. The two biggest financial markets in China and the U.S., the two biggest economies, basketball is the #1 sport. So you have basketball, soccer, they're both going to be able to thrive. There's no other real global sports out there. And so the question is, how do you push globally? What do you change that will enable people to enjoy the game more? We don't have KPIs there yet. Ticket sales, that's an interesting KPI. Sponsorship sales, that's an interesting KPI. But it's the things from the fan perspective. Who's watching? How are they participating? What does that really look like? And some of those are really numbers we control, and some of them are really in the control of the league, and some of them are actually really in the control of the players.
Yeah, how does the NBA supplant soccer as the world sport? Because we were talking on the other panel about you go up to someone in a random city on the globe and you can say Ronaldo, Messi. What's it going to take to be Curry, Durant, LeBron to make it that global game? And does running a global business at Microsoft kind of help you prepare for that?
Well, yeah, probably. But the truth of the matter is basketball and soccer can well coexist. You know, what will it take for soccer to get anywhere in the United States? I don't know. What will it take soccer to get where basketball is in China? I mean, literally, Michael Jordan was talking about his first experience going to China. They didn't let him leave the hotel after his first meeting. It was considered a safety risk because there were so many throngs of people just going crazy for Michael Jordan on the ground. This is, back a few years when he was playing. What does that look like? Both of these sports can coexist. They're going to get popular in different ways in different parts of the world. If you look at the NBA draft this year, half the players drafted came from Europe. Half were international players, not all from Europe. But half the players drafted. For every player that's drafted, that leads to big and exciting things. Now, obviously, in Europe, soccer is a much bigger sport. On the other hand, there are countries in Europe where basketball, where the sport is really producing world-class folks, in Eastern Europe particularly, I think you would say, in Spain. Again, soccer is still clearly #1, just like basketball is clearly, I'll say in the United States, #2 to football, but way kind of ahead of where baseball and soccer and other sports are in this country.
You mentioned earlier Second Spectrum, which is a company that you also invest in. What are you looking for as a sports technology investor these days? What are the areas that are getting you most excited?
I'm not a sports technology investor. I believe in what we're trying to do specifically to transform the fan experience. And so I'm not looking for investments hither and yon. I really want this thing to work. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I've made a loan. I've made an investment. We've signed up to be a customer for the product. We're the first team that has enough control over its rights for those guys to actually do their work with us. So we are kind of in the game together, and part of that was an investment. But it's not like the doors are open, and I'm encouraging people to come up and see me afterwards because I'm just dying to do an investment. I'm not an investor, primarily. I've decided I don't really even enjoy being an investor. So give me index funds and give me things that are fun because they fit with something else I'm excited about.
On the topic of investments you might not have enjoyed, Twitter was an investment you made. At one point you owned about 4% of the company. Do you still have that stake?
I certainly do have some of that stake, yeah.
What do you think the future of Twitter is in the realm of pro sports? And how do you see the social network adapting there?
Well, I think real-time information is as valuable and interesting as anything you're going to find. What do sports analytics departments use? #1 source during the draft? Twitter. Literally, in our draft room, you have big TVs with Twitter feeds that guys have set up because that's the best way to get real-time data in terms of what's going on around the league. The Twitter feeds of certain reporters are actually quite important in sports. So this notion of real-time information, in which clearly Twitter leads, I think will play kind of a very, very big role. The notion of broadcasting things, video that is interesting to you. Twitter has great assets. So I think not only not Twitter specifically, which is a company I think a lot of, I think has a great brand, has a set of issues, but I think will do a great job kind of moving forward to address them. But the notion of real-time information during games, during the draft, during free agency, who signed with who? You want to get the most real-time data? You're actually watching about 5 guys' Twitter feeds. What do they say on the vertical? Essentially, what's Watts saying? What's Aldridge saying? What's Mark Stein saying? Those things are important.
Speaking of free agency, there was a free agent by the name of Kevin Durant who you guys were pursuing, and he said he was blown away by the presentation that the Clippers gave, and you were in the room. So what were you doing in there?
Working hard, selling our butts off. Look, we're a great team, and we're a great. I believe wholeheartedly we're a great destination for Kevin Durant. Now he made another decision. That's certainly his prerogative. But what we wanted to do was bring alive to him the possibilities. He loves tech, as it turns out. We wanted to show him what it might be to be kind of the player associated with the advance of technology in sports. We talked about that. But fundamentally, what's the most important thing to talk about? Who's he going to play with? Can we win? What does that look like? How does that build his brand? How does that build his legacy? What will he get from his teammates, from our coach? What does that all look like? What are the analytics? What should the analytics tell him? I mean, I can now tell you Blake Griffin makes more passes per game than Steph Curry or Russell Westbrook. I said Blake Griffin. I didn't say our point guard, Chris Paul, who's in a whole nother league. Yes, I can tell you that because maybe Kevin Durant wants somebody to pass him the ball. So we used analytics to help bring alive for him some of the opportunities in our system. He made a different choice. Some of that gets down to another form of analytics, which is what will the cap allow us to do with our team this year and going forward? What would the cap allow, Golden State to do, Miami, the Celtics, the Spurs, the Thunder, the guys who pitched Durant, and he made his choice, and now we're going to work really hard to make sure he has to live with it.
So by the way, I wore this shirt just for you, my Sonics Kevin Durant shirt.
I gave Kevin Durant one of those shirts when we were back there. I went and got a Durant Sonics jersey to gift to him.
So on that topic, we have to ask you here in Seattle, what would you say to your fellow Seattle area residents who want the NBA back in this city?
I think it's important to keep wanting that. I don't think it's likely to happen, in the next year, 2 years. It's just not likely to happen. There's been no discussion of expansion since I've been involved with the league. So I don't think that'll happen. The league has moved to really favor teams staying in their current markets. So you have to find a team that's at the end of the lease, where it looks hard to build an arena, where they've tried really hard to build an arena, and you have to show an arena can be built in Seattle, because unlike Oklahoma City, who built an arena before they had a team, I don't think an arena is going to get built here before a team comes here unless it gets done in the context of hockey. I mean, over time, will that happen? Yes, I somehow believe it'll happen. In my own case, I'm 60 years old, and I wasn't prepared to wait 5 or 10 years. And the Clippers were an amazing opportunity for me, and it happened right after I retired. And I like LA. It's not a bad place to go spend some time in the summer, in the winter. In the summer, this is a pretty good place. In the winter, it's not bad to get every now and then, just every now and then. And so we'll keep our home here. We're commuting down. The Clippers are not going anywhere, ever. I will die owning the LA Clippers in Los Angeles.
Props to you as an owner for making that commitment. It would be nice if everybody did that.
Yeah, and yeah. So you've got the Clippers, and you're probably not going to buy another NBA team, but you mentioned hockey. What about owning a hockey team here in Seattle?
Well, I haven't really, since 1975 or 6, I had not attended a hockey game until the week it was announced I was buying the Clippers. Our landlord also owns the Kings, and they invited me to come to a Kings game. So I'd been to one hockey game in about 40 years. I think hockey's a perfectly great sport. It's just not my sport. So if somebody wants to do that, I think that'd be great.
Are there any other professional sports leagues that you would be interested in acquiring a team in?
It's not one of these things where I say, oh, well, I'm just like a sports owner. I have a particular passion for basketball. I've had a particular passion in the past for football, but I got my hands full with basketball. I was a team manager for our football team when I was in college. I was the team statistician for our basketball team when I was in college. But I'm not sitting here looking for additional opportunities to own sports teams. It actually takes real time. It does take real time. There are some owners who don't put real time in. I do.
Yeah. Well, what else are you doing with your time these days? You were running Microsoft, and that's over. So you're running the Clippers, which is obviously a big job. But I heard you're doing yoga now.
I am doing yoga now.
Literally right now.
I am.
That's good. I like that pose.
That was a joke, but I really am. It's kind of 5 things. Number one, certainly is I'm having a lot more free time. My golf handicap is starting to get into shape again. I'm starting to get in better shape again. So that'd be number one. Number two, I really do own about 3 things other than the Clippers. I do own Microsoft stock and spend some time analyzing and thinking about it, along with the Twitter investment. Otherwise, I own index funds, so that takes some time. Now we're getting to the big things. The Clips, look, there are professionals who know what they're doing at the Clippers. On the other hand, when it comes to how ticketing changes so we get our guys in, what might we do for a new arena in Los Angeles? I care about that. How do we change the broadcast experience? It turns out there is actually a little bit of value I can add to the basketball side. This cap stuff is like a big math problem. It's not just a player evaluation problem. It's the, how do you sort of take, I think of it like this kind of puzzle, almost like a jigsaw meets Rubik's Cube thing, and what are the opportunities you really have as you flip through that? So I spent some time on the Clippers. I've been working on a project that I think of as a 10K for government. 2 years ago, I sort of gradually started thinking about where philanthropy can really add value in the U.S., because my wife and I are really only interested in the U.S. because we think there's enough issues, and that's our passion. But one of the things you have to understand is, what does government really do? And then I got switched on to, what does government really do? How big is it really? What are the measurable outcomes of government? And it turns out if you start with either Bing or Google and just start working, you're not going to be able to figure that out. I mean, really, it is really hard. I'm not I'm a pretty smart guy. It was hard for me to figure out. And I said, look, it would be kind of fun to try to pull this stuff in a comprehensive and comprehensible way and publish it. And, we've made a lot of progress. We've got a partnership with a group at the University of Pennsylvania. We have a partnership with a group at Stanford, a group at Harvard. We've got an economist working for us. We're now sort of in the writing phase. We have a 290-slide PowerPoint deck, which is good for the wonks, but not good enough. We're trying to put the data all online so people can dig down through it. So I've spent a lot of time on that. And then lastly, my wife and I are very interested in where folks with some time, some energy, some resources, and some connections, which we feel is us, where do we make a difference in terms of kids who, when they're born, have a very high probability of staying poor like their parents. I mean, it turns out that in some populations, if you're born poor, the bottom quintile, let's say, there's still only a 20% chance that or 22% chance that you'll be as poor as your parents. That's not so bad, 20%, 20%. On the other hand, you can find populations where it's 50, 60, 70% likely that if your parents are poor, you stay poor. And I believe in this notion, my wife believes in this notion, that America should be a place of opportunity. And if people don't have opportunity by, in a statistical sense, by virtue of where or to whom they were born, what kind of a difference can we make? And so we made a number of contributions, particularly in the area of child welfare, mental health, job opportunity for so-called opportunity youth. And yet, we think there's a whole lot more that probably can be done to help communities, community activists, other folks who are interested, really build infrastructure in some neighborhoods that can really help kids come out of poverty. So those would be the 5 things.
I understand. That's great.
That's
Absolutely.
awesome.
I understand you were out this morning and you bumped into Jim Weber, the CEO of Brooks. And
I did.
And you had lots of feedback for him on his shoes.
I did.
Let's talk about wearables and data. Where do you see that going for the casual fan, for professional sports? You have great perspective on this from your time at Microsoft.
Well, let me comment on this primarily from the standpoint of professional athletes, because I think there's a reasonable amount of misunderstanding. I don't think technology is playing a very big role right now. I don't think anybody has come up with technology that athletes particularly think will help. It's not like there aren't some uses of technology, don't get me wrong. On the other hand, if you said, kind of what is it that the athletes believe in that they must do, you're not going to find much. It also turns out, and I think this is true in all sports, teams can do what they can do, and yet most of the training and development happens in the off season. And recommendations for the teams are great, but most of the big-time players have their own trainers, their own staff, and so the question is, what is it that people buy into? And right now the answer is, not very much. Jim and I were talking as he was out for his run about some stuff that helps you chart your body, what can you do, and those things are emerging. But it's not like there's something that's been so compelling to athletes. People talk about what teams use. The thing that really you have to galvanize your mind around is what do athletes want to use? And I just don't think that's gotten as far as the rhetoric would cause you to believe. When it comes to casual people, yeah, I think it tells you I went from sedentary to non-sedentary, and that's a very good thing. And then people get sort of compulsive and hooked, and that you can take that in new ways. And the more bells and whistles, the more you can let people be compulsive. And there's an advantage. There's also some disadvantages of compulsivity. People can go a little nuts, but I think that's. There's a very good role it's played. It doesn't mean people don't have good stuff. Jim was telling me about some good stuff that Brooks has, and I've heard about good things at Nike, and a lot of folks, some startups, and yet there's nothing that's grabbed at least our athletes. It's not. I mean, I ask, but there's nothing that you would hear. I mean, the number one thing people rave about to me is our hyperbaric chamber. It's technology. It really is technology, and the fact of the matter is, it really does take inflammation out of the body between games. Somebody grabbed me and talked about sleep. That's a good one. You finish a game at 10 o'clock at night, guys can't get to bed until 2 or 3. They just can't. You know, you need to eat, you're wired up, physically wired up, and that makes it a tough day. Can the coach schedule practice the next day? Hard to do, because you want the guys to be able to get 8 hours of sleep. Practice is normally in the morning. How do you think about that? In basketball, teams don't practice very much during the regular season. There's just no time for the body to recuperate. And at least on the athlete performance side, I have not seen much which has made a difference and stands in the short run to make a difference in terms of those issues.
Are you optimistic long term that technology people will come up with something?
You got to decide what the focus is. I think right now the focus on technology a little bit is looking cool. But if you're really trying to help an athlete, for example, understand their spring, the key is not to help the athlete understand their spring. You need to help the athlete really understand what that understanding can lead to in terms of training, can lead to in terms of performance on the court. And I think right now a little bit the technology feels like it's for its own sake, or at least people haven't put together a full solution that makes sense to the athlete. Yeah. So I'm not pessimistic. I just think things have a way to go.
Let's circle back around to the fan experience, because these are ultimately your customers. Try to see around a corner a little bit. If you were to look 3-5 years out, what's it going to be like to go to a Clippers game as a fan? Am I going to be wearing a virtual reality headset? What am I going to be doing as a fan in the stands?
Let me give you a first perspective, and I have this perspective. We're building a little office, my wife and I have this perspective everywhere. There's not much you want to build into the new arenas. You don't, because it'll change. Remember when it was sort of cool to think about building screens in the back of seats? Come on, that's ridiculous today, and yet a lot of money was put into that. You have to think through kind of what is it and where do you want to put things. Henry was talking about the notion of great broadband. That will be important. That is a service that if is not in good shape in arenas, I think you'll be in trouble. But then where do you want to have screens? Do you want there to be screens other than the screens people bring into the arena? Do you want it to be all fixed screens? How do you control those screens? Where's the capital investment well spent? Where should you let me call it customer equipment, really be the thing? Which devices should we support? Yeah, I do think there'll be an augmented reality experience. As much as I think we want to enhance the experience for people at home, I think if people have the right device, whether it's their phone or their sort of augmented reality device like a Microsoft HoloLens, you do want people to be able to get more out of the game. Our coach hates phones right now. Hates them in our arena. Because it takes people from being in the game and cheering and supporting our guys to, come on, we need people. I mean, we want fans helping us win ball games. And I'm not saying people shouldn't bring their screens in and do their thing, but what you really want to do is have the experience enough integrated that it's not sort of 50% of the time the fan is distracted. If people want to do that, it's obviously their choice. But we are trying to put together an experience that's entertaining enough that we can keep the fan kind of riveted to what's going on the court. And how do you do that? And what's the role of technology? In the meantime, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge in today's society.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, and who knows whether you can change it. But that burden is on us, the team, to make sure that we have an exciting enough game and exciting enough periods between games, between periods, and it's important that we weave the technology naturally into the experience as opposed to have them be almost, super divided.
Yeah, that conversation reminds me of Mark Cuban because he's had a lot of comments about he wants people off their phones when they come to the game. And so speaking of Mark and guys like Paul Allen, there's a lot of these former tech guys in the league now. Do you talk to them for advice? I know you've talked to Paul a little bit about keeping the general manager separate from the coach and stuff like that. So do you call them up and chat about the teams, or what are those relationships like?
Well, Paul and I are good friends, so we talk about a lot of different things. I can't say there's sort of the tech owners corner at the owners meeting where we just get together and say tech. It just, you know, if you put the tech owners in the corner, what are they going to talk about? Players, wins. Maybe revenue. And if they're from a small market, they say, woe is us. And they're from a big market, they say, we're not in that great shape either. Don't think you should get more revenue sharing. I mean, it's, you know, it's, on the other hand, when tech is part of the discussion. I was in a meeting yesterday at our owners meeting, and we were talking about how do we use technology to build new revenue streams. Where does fantasy fit in? Fantasy has been a real spark to fan interest in football. I mean, the rise of football isn't independent of fantasy. It is correlated with fantasy. Basketball is much harder to do good fantasy because there's so many games at different times. Football is sort of well orchestrated. How do you really think about that? What does that look like? And it's I'll call it a tech issue. It's really a tech issue. So whether it's fantasy, the way game broadcasts work, technology in arenas, there are some cases. Cuban brought up yesterday something and told me it was my problem, but how would you do, for example, work in Minecraft, to have a Minecraft world in which sports and teams would sensibly integrate themselves? And there are issues relative to Microsoft policies around Minecraft, but it's a very reasonable, good thing to think through.
Are there opportunities in esports for pro sports teams?
That's complicated. Some owners think absolutely. At minimum, people who own their buildings in sports will host esports events. And keeping the building busy is a good thing if you own an arena. The flip side is there a role for owners in basketball to own esport franchises? And the truth is, you know, there are software companies, there are game companies that basically own most of the popular IP, and it's not clear to me that there's an interesting return other than hosting games from, you know, World of Warcraft or whatever people want to play. The interesting one, of course, though, is basketball. Should basketball teams, just like we own franchises, we may own WNBA franchises, we may own franchises in the D-League, should we own franchises in the fantasy world? Should we own youth franchises separate from esports? Those are the interesting questions, I think.
Do you see, because of your background, you know, you have tons of insight into video games because of the Xbox business. Do you see yourself or the Clippers potentially being a leader there, showing the way?
That would need to be something we embraced as a league. Otherwise, who's playing who? Right. We don't own our arena. Right. The folks who own our arena, AEG, Staples Center, you know, they will think through how they rent out their arena for such events. But it wouldn't make sense for one ball club to start that particularly on its own, I don't think.
So as you look at your 2 years as an NBA owner, have you learned anything about leadership? What are the lessons you've learned that you might not have picked up in your time at Microsoft? Share some of those with us if you could.
Yeah, I would say 2 or 3 things. I used to think, you know, business was a place of accountability. It's not. I mean, it is in a long-term sense. You know, I'm proud of the fact we, quadrupled profit while I was CEO, and boom, that was great. And, you know, there's these innovations, and if you get it right the first time, great. If you don't, you tweak it up. I mean, it's good. It's not like basketball. Real time. Boom, boom, boom. People are making decisions. Accountability, everybody can watch everything you do, everybody can read infinitely a dissection of what you do. Nobody knows more about what you did than anybody else if they want to know it. You know, it's not like, ooh, you know, there's some numbers that aren't reported by a company. You know, Microsoft says they're not going to break out LinkedIn results separately. Shoot, I worry about it. That doesn't happen in basketball. Every number is available for everybody to think about, analyze, harp on, carp on. There is a ton of accountability. There's also a ton of leadership, and it's real-time, split-second leadership. You know, who's going to handle the ball on this play? You know, we beat the Spurs in Game 7, not this year, but last year. You know, the last play was what it was all about. What play we were going to run, how were we going to run it, who was going to end up taking the shot, was it going to be Chris or Blake? We won the game, life is great. But it takes real leadership. People get down. It's not like you can sort of, okay, we're going to hold a company meeting, blah, blah, blah. We'll set down a couple of memos. The waves and tides move kind of slowly. It's no, boom, we're in the locker room right now. Or players chewing out another player's ass right now during the game because the guy needs a little bit of juice. And people, you know, is it the coach? Is there an obvious leader? Only one person who can lead? No, there's not a natural hierarchy. Not really. You know, even I learned this a little bit even in the recruiting process. Who recruits players to come to teams? Well, the owner's got a little bit, the general manager's got a little bit, the coach has more, and the other players on the team have even more. So the notion of leadership and how it forms and how it develops, and, you know, there are leaders, and then there's some super leaders. You know, I might refer to some people as alphas. They're in a world of people who perform at world-class level and people who lead at world-class level. You know, they got something extra. You know, I think people would say, you know, Golden State is a great basketball team. They have the MVP of the league. And yet I might say Draymond Green is as much the soul of leadership on that team as anybody. And Cleveland, who won it this year, it's a little simpler. The MVP is also clearly the leader, and he's clearly, you know, an amazing athlete. Steph Curry is amazing. I mean, he's just an amazing player. And yet the role in leadership of Steph versus Draymond, if you watch it on the floor, both have a role, but Draymond seems to have a different and special kind of leadership role.
Yeah, what are those alpha, what are they doing? How are they leading? What that's different?
There's something about the, I mean, again, I may be wrong. I'm still watching this stuff for the first time. But in a world of a lot of leaders, there's some people who lead in different ways. You know, Tim Duncan just retired. I don't know Tim Duncan. I don't know most of the guys I just talked about. I'm not going to talk about our own team. But Tim Duncan clearly had a quieter style. I mean, everything you read, more self-effacing than most, quieter. And yet I don't doubt for a second that his leadership, in whatever way he communicated, was fundamental to San Antonio's success.
As we wind down here, are there any concluding words of advice that you'd give to a crowd of people intensely interested in this intersection of sports and technology?
Yeah, what I'd really do is I'd say walk through every position, I'll call it every position, every role in the sports world, and ask the problem not of what tech can do from them, but what do they want, and then where does tech fit in? What does the coach want out of ticket sales? What does the sales manager want out of ticket sales? What does the fan want out of the broadcast experience? What does the guy in the video room still need? What does the guy in the analytics department still need? What does the capologist need? Turns out, you know what capologists use a lot? Are these web services that are pretty darn good, like SportTrack. I mean, the things that are on the public internet, given the full public visibility of all that goes on, those things do wind up actually being an important part of the problem. But you almost have to put yourself in what do the trainers really want? What do the athletes really want? I think this was an issue at Microsoft. It's an issue generally in the tech world. Things come tech out, which isn't bad. But after the first wave of tech out, then it has to go customer scenario in. And I don't think people are asking themselves enough, what is it that the trainer really cares about? And then how do you use this impressive tech innovation to help the trainer, to help the athlete, to help the video man, to help the analytics guy, to help the coach off between games, to help coaches in games. And I think if people just sort of walk through that, that's how you're going to wind up with the solutions that really make a difference in sports.
Steve Ballmer, thank you very much for being at the GeekWire Sports
Thank
Tech
you all.
Summit.